The House comes to questions for oral answer. Question number 1, in the name of Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister and asks, does he stand by all his statements, and if so, how?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Yes, and with fear and trepidation, I'm about to be mauled by the member.
Supplementary question, Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Prime Minister, how does he stand by the statement on the new parliamentary palace that, quote, it just makes sense long-term for us to own these premises, end of quote, when he does not have the same view on the ownership of state houses or, for that matter, state power companies?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes, and I can assure the House that if that member got anywhere near ever being a minister, he'd be the first one round measuring up the carpets, trying to check that it was a big enough office for his ego.
Question.
Supplementary.
Order. Order.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Prime Minister, if he says, quote, the economics support that view, end of quote, how much rent has the taxpayer paid for Bowen House since it was sold in 1998 by a national government that included Ministers English, Brownlee and the current Speaker?
Insofar as this Prime Ministerial responsibility, the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, firstly, the member will appreciate, A, I don't have that information. The Speaker's office may have that as someone responsible for the parliamentary precinct. Secondly, I wasn't in government in 1998, nor was I in Parliament, but Winston Peters was.
Order. Supplementary question, Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Prime Minister, if the, quote, economics support that view, end of quote, in 2016, does that not mean that the sale of Bowen House by the national government was hardly prudent economic management on behalf of the hard-pressed taxpayer?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, no, I think circumstances change, but one thing that we are aware of now, I think, is that under an MMP environment where there's changing configurations in Parliament, and actually with increasing security risks as we saw on Budget Day in 2016, I think overall it makes sense for the completion of the new parliamentary complex. As I said at my post-cabinet press conference yesterday, it makes economic sense, and I think it actually makes practical sense for Parliament as a operating unit.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Ron Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Prime Minister, if the 1998 privatisation of government buildings, which included Bowen House, was meant to build, quote, a broad Kiwi shareholding democracy, end of quote, why was the company it was sold under subsequently taken over by Australians and delisted?
And again, in as far as there may be some Prime Ministerial responsibility, the Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I A, don't have any knowledge of that, and B, don't have any parliamentary responsibility for that. But given the member is in a party called New Zealand First, and he seems to be opposed to everything that migrants and offshore people do, I would have thought he would like a parliamentary complex owned by the New Zealand taxpayer, not a building owned by a foreigner.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Ron Mark.
You are silly. You are silly, buddy. Supplementary to the Prime Minister.
Order. Just before I call Ron Mark, I just need a little less interjection from my right-hand side. Supplementary question,
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Prime Minister. If in 1997 the cost to build the parliamentary palace then was $94 million, how could the cost in 2016 possibly be $100 million, particularly when it now includes a rebuild of the press gallery? Isn't it more likely to be in excess of $200 million?
Again, insofar as there may be Prime Minister responsibility.
Speaker, well, the simple answer is I don't know what they were proposing in 1997, but my guess is a completely different complex. As the Speaker has correctly said yesterday in his capacity about the parliamentary complex, this makes sense for the taxpayer because the ultimate cost of owning the building over a long period of time is actually cheaper than paying rent.
Order. Order. little interjection now from both sides of the House. Is there a supplementary question?
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dennis O'Rourke.
With regard to his many statements about Kaikoura's post-quake transport priorities, does he see the extension of the Kaikoura Airport runway as an urgent priority for government funding to enable larger aircraft safe access for passenger and freight services, and if not, why not?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, the advice I have is that something that Council may have discussions with Ngāi Tahu about. I think from a freight perspective, realistically, the logical use is not necessarily flying things in all of the time. As was, I think, announced yesterday, KiwiRail looking to get into coastal shipping in a more significant way. That will allow a lot of pressure to be taken off the system by freight trucks, and then that will allow some capacity for more to be trucked actually into Kaikoura itself.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dennis O'Rourke.
What assurance will he give to Kaikoura residents and businesses that the government will fund essential upgrades as well as the current remedial work on the inland road to provide a resilient and higher capacity alternative road to Christchurch?
The Right Honourable Prime
Speaker,
Minister.
well, the member really needs to direct that question at the Minister of Transport, who has responsibility via the Transport Agency for the remedial work of the damaged roads. Clearly, the #1 priority is ultimately ensuring that there's a stable and long-term suitable road that would form State Highway 1. But of course, over time, there'll be also work done to the inland road.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dennis O'Rourke.
Will the government provide funding to KiwiRail and to Littleton Port Company to ensure that a new ferry service is provided between Wellington and Littleton, at least for freight?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, well, yesterday KiwiRail, I think, indicated that they were interested in and would be pursuing a coastal shipping option. I think that fits in with the fact that many of the freight operators have indicated a desire to undertake firm commitments on coastal shipping while the rail access is unavailable and will be for a considerable period of time. What and how KiwiRail actually secure that vessel, that's a matter for a commercial operator.
Question